Good morning, everyone who's here today with us. It's a pleasure to give you a warm welcome on behalf of the UNESCO Santiago, Chile for Latin America and the Caribbean to this launch for the Alliance for a Green Education. I would like to thank our colleagues from Earth Charter who are here facilitating this space to share this important materials. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Christian. I am the coordinator for Education for World Citizenship. As you know, these are the fourth goal. This is a very important space for us because we generate a lot of synergies. A while ago, we had the COP here in Brazil, where we also had a space, and we presented new materials in this partnership that our colleagues are going to talk more about in a second. And also, we had a meeting about the UNESCO recommendations for education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development, a space where we hear from different countries, partners, and key partners, where we can have spaces to share information so that we can build from the mind of people in all of the different scopes that are the mandate of UNESCO. In this sense, this webinar has on the one side the objective of presenting what we're doing from UNESCO and with our partners in the Partnership for a Green Education, and at the same time, learn practical implementation skills. How does this look in the territory, in the countries with key partners, in this case, into increasing UNESCO in the region? So I would like, without further ado, I would like to welcome my colleague Bernardo, who's going to talk today about a partnership for green education. Bernardo is a part of the team for Partnership for a Green Education. He's an educator for sustainability with more than 12 years of experience on education and climate change and sustainable development. He has academic, private, and NGOs. He has worked with them. So it's a real pleasure for us to give you a warm welcome today. You have the floor, Bernardo. Thank you very much, Christian. And good afternoon and good morning. I'm very happy to share this launch of our publications in our language. This is something we've worked on in UNESCO Paris, supporting the Alliance for Green Education, and to contribute so that these efforts can be translated into our language too. I'm going to try to be brief. I have some slides to share, the last publications we've done. I would like to begin. Christian, can you look at this? Yes. So I would like to share that here in UNESCO Paris, we are a part of the education sector, and specifically, we would support the efforts done in education for sustainable development. This is understood as the contribution for the accomplishment of the NDGs, teaching students all of the skills, values, and attitudes that they need. This encompasses different topics in different ways according to the country, but a common point that we have is that it promotes social transformation toward a more equitable and sustainable society. This means that it's not enough to know the state of the world, but it is also necessary to use this knowledge to promote individual and collective actions. Now, going into detail, the state of education and climate change, that's the big justification of our work, is that the progress of education and climate change and environmental issues is not as urgent as the climate crisis demands. The last researches from UNESCO show that 47% of curriculums don't make any references to climate change in 100 countries. 70% of young people say that they cannot explain climate change. And a report from the IDB from 2024 said that the danger that climate change has for education, but also its potential to promote real changes. This is our starting point to begin toward a green education. And of course, 1.5% of the climate funding is destined to education in 2021. In fact, not only the efforts in terms of science, but also the funds to allocate these funds on these two specific topics, education and climate change. This is how the Partnership for Green Education is born, and it was launched on the Summit for Transformation of Education of the UN in September 2022. It brings together the six action areas, and it talks about the needs to transform educational systems under the framework of the ESD for UNESCO. So the idea is to empower people with their knowledge, values, skills, and necessary behaviors to live in a sustainable way, not only in the environmental areas that's already known, but also in the economic and social. In this framework, the UNESCO has the Secretariat of the Alliance for Green Education, and the objective is to strengthen the capacity of the countries to offer climate education that's high quality and to make greener every aspect of learning, basing on the holistic approach of the ESD. The partnership wants to promote students so that they can have the necessary skills for a sustainable inclusion toward green and digital economy societies. This partnership is going to be consolidated as an inclusive platform, a practical community, and it promotes synergies with global partners, considering four pillars. We have the greening curriculum. It's about the curriculum. Then we have greening schools, about making schools greener. Then the learning education systems and teachers, and then communities. As you can see in this slide, the Alliance for Green Education is a collective effort that encompasses 97 member states, right now more than 1,900 organizations in different sectors, not only NGOs or educational institutions, but also the private sector. We have a consultative group with representatives from 15 organizations, member states, IGOs, young youth, civil society, and foundations to make this in a more inclusive way. And here from UNESCO Paris, we have the Secretariat for this alliance. Now we're moving toward four pillars, as I said: green schools, greener schools, greener curriculum, teachers, and greener communities. And every 3 months we meet in our different working groups, where each one of these working groups is co-led by representatives from different organizations, including some agencies from the UN and other multilateral organizations. This collective effort, and for those who still haven't joined this partnership, it's a collective effort that we keep working on, and we invite you. Further on, I'm going to share the link so that you can join the alliance. Among the global standards that we have developed last year, we launched 2 different publications. The first guidelines were greener schools and green curriculums. And this year, we managed to translate with the efforts of every person here, and also some people who are going to share some of their experiences, and mainly thanks to the collaboration of Christian Brabel and Romina, we have managed to translate these 2 publications to Spanish. With this publication, we want to create a common standard, and we want to support the monitoring of this progress. In a way, we produce these documents. We have developed the standardship for green schools and the standard to make green curriculums. Each one of these has an associated goal. For green schools, by 2030, 50% of schools should be green in every country by 2030. And in the curriculums, at least 90% must include green curriculum in their national curriculum. Now, with regards to the other two pillars, pillar 3 is in teaching, and it's likely that next year we're going to publish this standard related to educators and to turning educators into the center of green education. A group of tools on this guideline is more oriented toward doing a policy brief. And the fourth one, this green communities that we just launched less than 2, 3 weeks ago, is the one where I participated in, and this one is oriented toward how to make municipalities greener. That the main objective is to work hand in hand with municipalities, and here they are going to promote learning experiences that are green in their areas. And these two are in development right now. Now, going into more detail and zooming in on the quality standard for greener schools, we understand as green schools those that try to promote social agents and those institutions that have a culture of sustainability in every aspect of the school. We're talking about the EDS and climate action. Now, what are these 4 dimensions? As you can see here, governance, schools governance, infrastructure and operations, teaching and learning, and participation of the community. These are approaches that every institution is following. It's nothing different than what we already know. But what we want is to line up each one of these basic functions so that we can help each one of these dimensions be greener. So we identified a global and comprehensive framework that allows us to have a common understanding of these minimum requirements that a green school should follow to be prepared. These concrete steps try to integrate the sustainability principles from the daily management and decision making, plus school governance, the process of teaching and learning, interaction of school with the community, and infrastructure and operations. This is addressed mainly to those organizations that manage accreditation schemes because they are the facilitators to implement this in schools. These organizations promote the ESD and share them with schools so that they can be available and ready to be prepared for this climate. This standard is also important for those who are developing policies that are related to schools. As I said, the goal that's related to each one of these guidelines, right now we want 50% of schools in every country to be green by 2030. I would like to include a QR. Now I included a QR code for those who are familiarized can have direct access to the Spanish version. Now, considering the accreditation process, I will share this and then I can share this presentation too. It's 5 basic steps through this guideline. What we want is for you to identify which criteria you comply with or not, so that to be a green school, we want them to comply with 1/3 of the proposed activities. You can complete this with an online form. And we invite everyone to join this partnership and to join to one of these accreditors that can be associated to the Ministries of Education or also to independent accrediting companies that are working with the ministries. Then we have the accreditation unit that reports if they comply or not and up to what measure. And then in the monitoring panel that I'm going to share later on, you will be able to look at the information from your school as a part of this global action, where we want to establish a global monitoring and the status of green schools by 2030. Now, following the next publication, the guideline to make the curriculums greener. This guideline aims to support countries in the integration and education on climate change in the study plans. It uses a holistic approach for the ESD, encompassing the dimensions that are environmental, social, and economic. It defines the results expected in education on climate change for different age groups, and it tackles not only the cognitive things we're used to, but also socio-emotional and conductual with an emphasis in action. These 6 topics are the main ones that we tackle in this guideline. We can see here then that this is a technical global orientation that doesn't really wants to say that you have to necessarily teach this, but more this is a starting point and an interesting reference for teachers and schools so that from this they can adapt these resources and contextualize them to their learning spaces. Obviously, it's not going to be the same, the climate vulnerability that the Amazon has with the climate vulnerability that El Llano has or that the Andes has. So this is a technical global orientation on how to include climate change in the study plans as an answer to what young people have said, that they want a more holistic education and oriented to action. As we can see, 70% of the youth say that according to the education they received, they don't feel prepared to face climate change. And 47% of the curriculums, as we said, don't include any references to climate change. These efforts try to include and offer study plans to make this possible. Now, some key principles for the design and implementation of green education in contexts that are not only formal but are also informal is that this was oriented to action, not only or mainly in cognitive matters, but also the promotion of justice is a key point. Without climate justice, there is no sustainability, there is no education for sustainable development. The content should be high quality, based today on the era of, especially today in the era of disinformation, and the content should be comprehensive and relevant, mainly because of what we said of the contextualization or localization of the information, that it's vital. The guideline has as an objective to be a fundamental tool. It's not a curriculum, but it's thought of as a baseline to check the existing study plans and to integrate climate change in every class. The following principles support the design and implementation of a green education in contexts that are both formal and informal. So, given that these strategies, what we try to do is include the what with the content and to contextualize it, but also to identify pedagogic strategies on how to learn integrated in a holistic way, focused in the student who's trying to find a reflect, and so that they can feel that they are part of the co-creation of the content and where to learn. And as I said before, it tried to contextualize this in the different learning spaces, both formal and informal, where we can apply this content. And lastly, this is a brief example on how we landed one of the important topics, that's climate anxiety and constructive adaptation, dedicated to a 16 and 18 years old, where we included some key ideas focused on 3 dimensions, both the cognitive from the left and the middle, social emotional, and oriented toward conductual action on the right. So these are some key ideas and important resources that aim to activate and to become a reference so the teachers can apply this in their classrooms. Now, lastly, the guideline includes also 10 steps to help you implement these contents in the curriculum. I'm not going to go into detail, I don't have a lot of time. And I would like to end by sharing with you that we also launched the guideline on green communities. This is not disconnected from the other guidelines. On the contrary, it aims to be complementary in where informal spaces are involved in we look at them in more in detail. And as I said, the main audience for this guideline is the municipalities in which obviously schools are also involved. And lastly, we have launched the monitoring panel, and this is a space that aims to share information and to be a sort of evaluator so that we can identify the status of each one of the dimensions in the world. As part of phase one, we have consolidated the data of all of the member states on the progress of each one of these pillars. And this panel is going to include profiles from the countries so that we can follow up their progresses. We're also going to include descriptions per country on which actions they're taking beyond what's described in these guidelines. We are going to share some impact stories to inspire others and some external links for a good practices for each one of these. We hope that by July next year, we can launch this page so that you can get to know it and identify and how to track the information presented here. And on phase two, we hope we can include the names of all of the organizations that are interested and that are also working on this, because what we want is to include and increase the collaboration and the efforts that are being done in the region and also globally. Lastly, I would like to end with an invitation to join this partnership. If you haven't joined us, you have the QR here. You can fill a basic form and you can have access to a platform that will include the participation in the working groups. As I said, we do this once every 3 months where we interact with representatives from different parts of the world, including representatives of the Latin American and Caribbean area, and we also receive invitations to participate not only in the working groups, but also in the virtual seminaries to strengthen capacities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fernando, for your presentation. What you shared in just a little time was the origin of the Alliance, its main pillars, and also the different materials that they are creative in it participatively. And I think that there is a lot of value in this work that, as you said, there's a lot of institutions that are working on this. There's also the practice and experience of little educators for sustainable development, among other things that are related to this. And this is also being considered to strengthen what we do in UNESCO. Something that I would like to highlight in what you presented is that this requires this to be relevant so that we can contextualize them, and they should be oriented toward action and social justice. These are key topics that we shouldn't lose from sight when we talk about climate change. This is an impact that's completely disproportionate from in other parts of the world. And also, this has an interesting value, and this is that when we educate about sustainability for climate change, we need to be able to live what we learn so that we can put it in practice. So we can see these principles reflective. They should motivate us to change our lifestyles. So thank you very much, Bernardo, for your presentation. We're going to leave the links that Bernardo shared on the chat, also an invitation so that you can join the partnership. As Bernardo said, we had over 1,600 people around the world and in the region, but it's always important to increase representation so that we can share the problems and challenges. So we're going to share this information as well. Now, we would like to greet the countries who are here. We have seen people from Chile, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Bolivia, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Argentina, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and Spain. So we have a representation from many different countries in the region, countries that are interested in having this material in Spanish so that we can implement it and work on it in their different contexts. So welcome everyone to this space. I forgot to mention that we have interpretation from Spanish into English. So if anyone needs the interpretation, you can click the interpretation button so that you can have access to this information. Now, moving on with this panel, I would like to open a space that, as I said, is going to have representatives from Chile. So yeah, since I'm from the office here in Santiago, where this is very present, so we want to take this panel. We're going to have two representatives from countries that are implementing these materials. So first, I would like to give the floor to Adonis, who is a colleague from Honduras, and he's going to share the certification process for schools with the Ministry of Education. He's the chief of the Department of Education, Communication, and Health of the Secretariat of Education in Honduras. He's the national coordinator of the network of schools. He's a licentiate in biology. He has a diploma in sustainable strategies. And before being the chief, he was a technician. He wanted to participate in different consultings for biologic monitoring and took different courses where he was trained. So, Adonis, it's a pleasure to have you here today and to learn a little bit more about the experience you have learned nationwide. Welcome. Thank you very much, Christian. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So, thank you very much. I'm going to share the presentation here so that we can begin. Please confirm if you can see the screen. Okay, I'm very happy, as I said, to be here participating in this webinar from Honduras. We are a country where we've seen as a priority in the Secretariat of Education to have a certificate for educational centers to incorporate in their curriculum and also in the practice every topic of a conservation and improvement of educational infrastructure, among other aspects. There are several slides that I'm going to share. We're going to move on a little bit quick. This is a certificate. What's a SIA certificate? Here, we've been working on this for a couple of years now. Luckily, last year we had the opportunity to have the help of UNESCO. Further on, we're going to see the incorporation in the certificate. This is called educational centers that are environmentally sustainable. What are the CIAs? These are educational centers of every level, both government and non-government, that under the our our promotion and together with the Secretariat of National Resources in our country, we try to give to this dimension not only with the curriculum approach or looking at this, but also that the activities should be oriented to practical activities in which we can incorporate to communities around each one of the educational centers. We won't begin from scratch. In the country, we had been working in a way that was disarticulate between the Education Secretariat with what we called before green and safe educational centers, and what they had when looking at the need that they don't duplicate the work. In 2023, we started working to have a certification process. And here is where we incorporated and we saw the draft. And we try to do a joint work, and I will send a warm regard. I know that we're going to have Carla Sabatini here who helped us incorporate what we had been working and lining this up with green schools. This year we tried to do an official launch a couple of months ago, and we're going to start incorporating and working with a pilot next year, since we're working directly with the educational centers. But what's important, the general objective here is to promote education and sustainable development in the educational community through a transversalization in the different curriculum spaces, through the implementation and consolidation of the certificate program in SEAS, linking this with the country. And we had proposed a goal of 6,000 educational centers, but we tried to reduce this by knowing the costs and the logistics this require. If we want to do this correctly, we should give them an accompaniment. So we reduced this number, but this is something open that we think. I think this could certify this centers by 2030. We should also train. The idea was to orient this to each one of the strategic areas proposed in the regulation. That's the part of the school governance through an adequate infrastructure and the correct and efficient operation, and an area of community connection. These are the four strategic areas that we will be able to encompass with the certification process. But many times, with all of this technical language, it's very hard for teachers to land and understand what they need and what they have to do. They have proposed, not just because the Secretariat wants to, but by looking at this with experts from other ministries and other institutions, others NGOs that can work directly with seven topics that were the most relevant for us as a country is, and not only as a country, these are topics that include everyone in Latin America, and I think that together we could share each one of these topics. And with these, we also want to be able to share each one of these topics. We want them to be able to help us implement good environmental practices and that we can also develop community projects. First, what affects everyone and it's the part of climate change is to give trainings to teachers on how to offer this in the classrooms and how they can also prepare themselves uh, for the impact of climate change by preparing environmental projects that will help decrease this footprint. Then risk management, as in Honduras, also the rest of Central America, we're very vulnerable countries, more than anything, considering tropical storms, cyclones, and hurricanes. And also, it's very important to be able to have an adequate management of a risk management, both for us and directive positions in this education secretariat, and to be able to go to each one of the educational centers so that they can have their emergency committees that can prepare their security plans for the educational centers and that they can train the committees so that they can attend to any emergencies and so they can have anticipatory actions and cooperation in all of this risk management section. Also, another one of the axes would be clean water and hygiene to be able to give them the capacities to the educational centers and the practices for cleaning and so that they can have safe water to drink, safe water to prepare foods, and cleaning the water sources for the community, comprehensive management of solid residues that is important for us in educational centers that usually generate different materials. What we usually consider as garbage can go into a circular economy environment and that they can benefit educational centers with these residues that generate, let's say, paper, plastics, aluminum cans, and other materials that are wasted in educational centers daily. Then healthy lifestyle, that this is pretty linked to the programs from that we promote from the Secretariat, school orchards, the a program from the government that has as a country that we have received a lot of recognition for having such a wide school food program that's based on that through the school orchard program we can give them fresh foods and they have several initiatives to have a animal protein and so that they can give it out during the school day in each one of the schools. So the healthy lifestyle part talks more about these concepts and it aims to promote these daily habits of mental health and physical health. Then the part of ecosystems, we're a country that Most of our territory has protected areas. We have areas where we manage forests. We have a lot of hydrographic, we have a lot of marine, of, it's very important to promote from the educational centers the conservation of the ecosystems. And lastly, in the part of sustainable energy, we aim to promote consumption and use of sustainable and alternative energies in the educational centers, and that we can decrease the gap of energy costs and being able to have an efficient environment in the educational centers and in the communities. Based on the guideline that we created, we're also going to have a guideline for good environmental practices. And through this one, we want to incorporate the community. The certificate as such states that each one of the educational centers should be able to implement good practices for low impact practices, medium impact, and high impact. Each one of these are cataloged as a low impact when these are activities done only in a classroom or with a group of students and incorporating some teachers. Medium impact is when it moves on to the other sections in the educational center, and we can have the participation of all the school. And high impact is when a practice incorporates other actors in the community, let's say municipal cooperations, church, water companies. In this way, they can include all of the actors in the society guided by the educational centers. What we want is for the educational center to become a center, and from the educational center, we want this to be able to offer all of these environmental education to the rest of the community. When incorporating all of these good practices, in the educational centers, we would be reducing the ecologic footprint in promoting experimental learning, generating a multiplying effect, and promoting a sustainable culture. And this is the part that's harder to do, to have a sustainable activity through time, so that not only will this be something that is considered mandatory, but it is also something that's done daily and that can be useful for a change in culture that then with time we're going to be able to observe. This is not something that we're going to be able to see in a year, but generationally we're going to be able to see this change. Now, very quickly, the certificate, we have contemplated that it should have a duration of 3 years, but every year we're going to cover certain goals, and we're going to give out an award and a yearly certificate. On the first year, the first level would be the basic level. It's going to be called a Nature Explorers. And here we can see the guideline where we can follow an application that the teachers at the educational center can have a virtual course. And here we would be covering one of our objectives, that is to train 80% of the teachers in each one of the educational centers so that they can go to the organizations, that we can give an initial diagnosis of the activities done by the educational centers, that they have the different communities, both the emergency and environmental committee, and that they can use our code. And this is basically the route that they're going to follow to implement the action plan on this year in the educational center. This is a class plan and an activity plan that the educational center is going to be doing this year to comply with the first two thematic that are climate change. And based on this, in the Secretariat and with other local partners, we're going to be offering the follow-up evaluations so that they can give out the awards for the first year, that we hope is going to be November, December 2026, that we can give out the awards to this first educational centers with the first level, that's a Nature Explorers. The second year will be practically the same, only they are going to have an update of the environmental plan the update of the Eco Code and their implementation, and at the same time, the second year would be called Green Heart Warriors, and the third year would be the schools that can comply with all of the thematic X's that are environment champions, and this means they would have a certificate by the third year, and these are going to be educational centers that were, it's not that by the third year they would stop all of these activities, but we would have to create a follow-up plan so that we could know that independently that the educational center has finished their 3 years, we can see that we can follow up all of the activities that the educational center has been doing. As in the Education Secretariat, we're not going to do this by ourselves. This is something that we need to incorporate if each one of the municipal corporations to each one of our department directions. And here at COAS, we need to incorporate each one of our liaisons in each one of the regions in the country. And we should be able to also bring in other international institutions or NGOs that can incorporate their activities in all of the certificate. What we want to do with this is that the certificates should be the umbrella that will encompass all of the initiatives that we're going to do with other institutions and with other NGOs. And we want everyone to incorporate their activities in compliance to each one of the objectives of the certificate and in the areas that where each one of them is involved so that they can incorporate. This is our participation on our side. We hope that this is clear, and if not, we're open to any questions and further participation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adonis, for your presentation. This is very clear and very interesting to see how this material looks in real life. This certificate that you showed us with the different stages and everything you did to make this relevant. I find this is very valuable to see how we can get teachers to incorporate this technical language, bring this into their practice. So in this sense, I know that there's a lot of learning for those who are here today so that we can support everyone. So thank you very much. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. And once again, I want to invite every participant here. If you have any questions, you can write them down in the Q&A box. Because at the end of the presentations, we're opening up a space so that they can open their questions. So we would like to invite you to check this information. Now, moving on with the panel, I would like to give the word to our colleague from Colombia, who's going to talk about training of teachers in green education. He's a licentiate in biology, a specialist in education and environmental management from the same university. He's a doctor in education at the Autonomous University from Barcelona. So thank you very much, Yeinson. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to our colleagues from UNESCO and to every person who can see us from the different regions in Latin America. Thank you very much. I feel also very proud to be able to share the experience of the Secretariat of Education in the district in what we call the Green Curriculum. Can you see the screen? Yeah. In the framework of the current development plan for 2020 to 2026 in the city of Bogotá, one of the things that the Secretariat of Education wants to do was strengthen the learnings in institutions, in public institutions. So we understand that even though the Secretariat has had a lot of progress in accompaniment and infrastructure and coverage, we still have some lags in terms of learning. This was the scenario through which the Secretariat thought, what are we going to do with these learnings that are based only in math, language, but we need to include environmental education. Previously, in our team in the Secretariat, we had already started working on a proposal in the framework of the Green Curriculum for UNESCO. I had access to the guideline, and once I had the opportunity to learn about it, I thought it was a very well-structured guideline. But climate change is not tackled only of this biophysical ecosystem, but it also encompasses elements that are economic, social. So we can talk about sustainable lifestyles, we can talk about resilience and climate justice. This is also the look that we have on environmental problems in public policies for environment learning, understanding the environment as a system of interactions between the politics and the system, and understanding the climate change response to many of these dimensions. So we saw a very coherent answer that could line up with what the Secretariat wanted to do. So we developed a guideline for priority learning in math, languages, and in natural sciences and environmental education. Here in Colombia, environmental education is looked from the natural sciences area in the framework of natural education from 94. Now, what's this priority learnings? These are the knowledge and skills that are more important for the kids should learn in each one of their levels. And these are essential learnings that are structural and will allow them to get to a higher level and to apply them in different contexts. This is a little bit, this is the timeline on how we built this priority learnings specifically in natural sciences. First, we did a document analysis. We checked different references we had in curriculum terms nationally, like basic learning rights, the data that we were getting, and also the data we found on the PISA tests. Then we did a methodologic reflection by checking other learning proposals nationwide in the districts, and we found, in the case of environmental education, the green curriculum with an approach in climate change. We built the first proposal for priority learning by looking at the criteria of progress, approach, and depth, trying to make sure that all of this reference is nationwide and internationally, which and understanding which could be adapted to our Colombian educational context and also from what we saw in the public schools here in Bogota. We did an exercise with feedback with experts in which we invited teachers from different schools, experts in these topics, and we also invited not only teachers who managed learning on climate change, but also experts in climate to see if the concepts that we had technically that were being adapted in each one of these guidelines were coherent science-wide. Then we did an assessment and adjustment by the team of environmental education, checking the recommendations of both experts and teachers who participated in each one of the roundtables in public schools so that they could be assessed and validated in the work we were doing. It's very important to highlight because Bernardo mentioned at the beginning that one of the main criteria we have in green schools is the topics of participation and governance. And also among the recommendations that we had for the adapting green curriculum is participation. This is not only a vertical process for the Secretariat of Education, but it gives us a reference and schools can apply this. Here, the exercise was very participative to build this proposal, and we talked with teachers, we checked their practices, but we also checked that what they proposed in terms of prioritizing learning. Once we had this proposal validated, we worked with teachers and managers, and then on January this year we worked, and right now there are some institutions that have started implementing it. It's very important to understand here why the Secretariat of Education adopted a proposal with an emphasis in climate change. First, because there is a need for a curriculum approach, even though we have managed to have progress in terms of institutions nationwide, because we had regulatory instruments, we had the environmental projects for schools. These are things that the schools do in their own institutions, but we found that there were many challenges, and I think this can also be compared to the challenges that we find in the region, and that's that even though we have good intentions, we propose different activities that have a pedagogical value that's good. Many times, this type of actions don't really encompass the complexity of environmental education, and they are disarticulated from a curriculum context, and they don't contribute to strengthening the learnings of the students. So we have activities that are generally managing solid residues, doing ecological actions, and doing different celebrations in the framework of the celebrations of environmental dates. And I insist, even though they have a pedagogic value, we can see that many times they are far away or disarticulated from the context of the educational institution in terms of the curriculums. So this was an opportunity where we learned why is it important to have a curriculum, and we saw that climate change is a problem that in didactic terms could be worked as a social environmental matter, because climate change involves natural sciences but also social sciences, and it's presented as a conflict where we can analyze this from different areas as is proposed in the green curriculum guideline, from the economic area but also in the social area and systemic, of course. And once again, the importance of being able to move forward and understand what climate change is. In the educational institutions, we can see that teachers, when we ask for reports on what they're doing for climate education, they send us reports to manage solid residues, and they celebrate dates. And of course, they have activities that are necessary, but many times we can see that they have a very heterogeneous experience on what climate change is, and it looks as if everything is useful when teaching climate change. Of course, everything can be related, but when are students going to understand what climate change is and what are the priority actions to be able to face climate change? This is the proposal we did from the Secretariat since first grade to 11th grade. So this is the basic structure. The process of the thought process is the relationship between the natural sciences and educational education. Here, I want to insist that there's still a debate on relating environmental education to natural sciences. As you know, this is a debate that's in the whole region. But in our case, in Colombia, this is the scenario that we have for environmental education. We can have all the debates in the policies, but in Colombia, natural sciences are linked to environmental education. So under this scenario, this is where we move. And now, how can we move forward and not stay with the perspective of the ecosystem of the science of weather or climate change? And this is precisely by understanding that climate change includes the dimensions that I talked about. Now, the structure also has a priority lessons for first grade. For example, it recognizes the changes through time throughout the day. For example, when it's sunny, it's cloudy, or when it rains, and how this affects the daily activities of people. To get to this learning, we need to have a series of learnings that's lined up with the green curriculum guideline, because we saw that in the guideline they had some dimensions from the cognitive, social, emotional, and from environmental. So we see that here this reflects what environmental education says. It's not only knowledge, it's not only thinking, it's also heart, social, emotional, but it's also hands, it's behavior. So this way we can structure all of the learnings prioritized since first grade to 11th grade. In terms of conceptual approaches per cycles, in cycle first, that encompasses first grade and second grade, the focus for the learning is based on observation of the atmospheric time to understand what the weather is like in the region, in Bogotá, in the different environmental territories that we have in Bogotá. In cycle two, we understand the relationship between weather and territory. We understand that there are some territories in my body, there's a territory in my home, there's a territory at school, in my community. In cycle three, that these are fifth, sixth, and seventh grades, we start working on concepts of sustainability, energy, and human activities. So we started understanding what is the greenhouse effect, what are the activities that contribute to increasing greenhouse gases. In cycle four, we start understanding that we start understanding the global phenomena that speed up because of climate change. We start also working on climate justice. And finally, in cycle five, we start looking at the measures of resilience and mitigation that we have for climate change. Of course, these are very in line to what the guidelines talks about from the item or the dimension of resilience, climate justice, and sustainable lifestyles. Now, social emotionally, we also start looking at from the first cycle, kids of 6, 7, and 8 years, that first there is a sensitivity with what happens in the environment. So when the day is rainy, when the day is sunny, how do I feel? What happens in my body? What actions do I need to have to be able to adapt to a rainy day, to a cloudy day? But this social emotional component moves forward until grade 11. The students of 16, 17 years have the capacity to understand how climate change can affect in different ways the different territories in the country. So there are vulnerable communities, there are indigenous communities, there are rural areas that are affected differently by climate change. So we need to start having empathy with what's happening in the different areas in the country and also what's happening in Bogotá and the environmental areas. This is the proposal that we have in the Secretariat of Education. And I should admit the work that UNESCO is doing is, even though we know that this has been a conversation with many of the teachers in Bogotá about the perspectives that we have on environmental education, that many times they don't want to line this up with the perspective of sustainable development because we begin with an economic position, but in every space I go to in the educational institutions, first I tell teachers, let's learn about this proposal. Let's see how they are approaching climate change from the green curriculum proposal. Let's step away from the title because there's also a conversation on the guideline green curriculum. So we need to understand climate change is from something green, from the ecosystem. No, the title also makes us think that from the dimensions, from other dimensions like the economic, like post-carbon economies, sustainable lifestyles, resilience, different dimensions that make us understand that this is more complex. And in the classroom, we also need complex measures to tackle this problem. So this is an invitation to every space where I go to. I always tell them, let's learn about the proposal. It's not only do it because UNESCO says it. What's interesting here is that we've done a debate exercise where we discuss with teachers, and I think that this is what's important to be able to get to a consensus and to build with teachers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Denson, and I really appreciate this because this also makes us talk about a conversation that these are different things that look for a common purpose, and it's renewing the relationship between people, the humanity, and nature. So this is something we've been talking about, how proposals can be contextualized, how they're relevant, and how they consider what we learned before. So it's also important to understand that this material are just a guideline, a, the way in which every school or every actor they can take this and reinterpret it. These are things that are going to depend from the different contexts. So now we'll have our next panelist. I would like to give a warm welcome to a good friend, Carla Sabatini, who's going to talk from the Earth Charter. She's the director of the Earth Charter in Education for Sustainability of the University of San Andres. She's a master in education, and in the master in education, she researches the role of the youth for sustainable development, also the progress in education for sustainable development policies and curriculums in Latin America. She's a consultant for different companies. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you very much, Christian. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today. This is a meeting between friends, and I'm really happy to learn more about this very interesting experiences. Maybe I would love to ask Jason if he could stop sharing his screen to see if I can share my presentation. And in the meantime, also as a part of this, I would like to give a high value in shared the processes shared with Adonis, who I had the luck of meeting firsthand. So thank you very much for this recognition. Thank you. I would also like to thank the team of the Earth Charter that, as I'm going to tell you in a second, has been a source of inspiration in something we've been doing for many years, but more recently, I'm sorry, but I still cannot share my screen. Okay, I have on the chat a little legend with the links to the work we do. And now I'm going to share a little bit more. But very briefly, for you to understand my context, I am here from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Here at UNESCO, this encompasses an umbrella of work that we feel is very comprehensive, and it involves some things that have been traditionally related to the education for sustainability or sustainable development, and other that also in UNESCO have been tackled from the umbrella separated from the global or citizens, and we make an effort to bring into the region um, a particular way that's very collaborative where we have this integration. So, of course, UNESCO is our main a lighthouse. This is the reason why we threw ourselves into the adventure of requesting the recognition as in a trajectory of over 20 years of work in the university, of working with other educational systems, but also we think it's important to nurture ourselves from other agendas that have different implications in the regional areas and that also translate international measures like the scientific evidence from the LPCC, also as other route paths from UNESCO, and very especially, as I said, the Earth Charter. A couple of years ago, by around 2018, I had the privilege of being there in the Earth Charter and to knowing in person Miriam and Patricia, my dear colleagues with whom I have shared in different collaborations. So, as I said, with all of these discourses and guidelines, even though at having UNESCO as the north, we also understand that our north is the south and that our Latin American region is culturally and biologically super diverse. So, trying to talk on behalf of the region really is too much, but I do have the power of being able to say that visually we could try to integrate the pre-colonial perspectives, indigenous and intergenerational measure. These are a group of sensitivities that also invite us to celebrate this big diversity that characterizes our region. The I think it's a good synthesis that the diversity in our region that's also manifested in different ways to materialize the experiences a big challenge when implementing materials like the Green Education Partnership that pretends to be of global, but also a good opportunity because I think we're a region that has a lot of capacity to nurture each other in different ways so that we can contextualize these guidelines. I have tried to sum up the different work lines and to see how they can add to the four big pillars in the Alliance for Green Education so that we can see that we try to give us a reference different consulting projects as what Adonis said would elaborate on the guideline and being able this is I will give you other examples not only for this UNESCO. But we also have an our own training offer that encompasses the concerns for the four pillars, as I will share in detail. And we also tried as much as possible to generate resources to share knowledge in a bigger measure so that this can be open a access for everyone. Now, starting with the standard of quality for green schools, considering the example. And always leading this lineup to the Alliance to these contexts and the dialogue with the particularity of the context and increasing appropriation methods that are genuine and useful for everyone. Before we denied this guidelines and these ideas, that's very in line with this because we've been following UNESCO's work for over 2 decades. We took these ideas, offering technical support to different national programs in Argentina, as is the case of a pioneer project that's a public policy in the autonomous city of Buenos Aires that has 1.5 decades of trajectory, and also different instances for the elaboration of a national strategy and environmental education. Because in my country, we have a law that's a necessary condition, but it's not enough to include those themes. And then it also escalates institutionally. We made an effort in elaborating cases, so maybe then we can share this. This is a NIS project where we created a very particular case in a rural school in Buenos Aires in a coastal town. And we also work with a private school from the suburbs in the city of Buenos Aires, who's also one of the oldest schools in our city. And they have started doing a very interesting process in our own community in San Andres. Now, with regards to the curriculum, we did a very big research in 2023, 2024, and we hope that the global situation will allow us to share this by the end of this year or early next year. And this was a deep curriculum mapping of all of the curriculum documents of mandatory education in 23 different countries in Latin America. And this allowed us to get to a sort of quantitative image, also qualitative on how or what's the distribution per disciplinary area. There were many interesting findings, and in our curriculums, they talk about the concern for sustainability. And maybe this goes in line with 47% of the curriculums that Bernardo presented in his initial presentation. This talks about a big vacancy that we have in curriculum development. So we are very active in working with different alliances with different actors. This to promote different types of projects that will allow us to have institutions of higher education like our own and to check our curriculums and to line up the pedagogical practices so that this not only will be a curriculum prescription, but also everything we know about how this should be taught can lighten up the selection of this content, especially this project involves us with Alicia and Miriam in a very nice collaboration with 14 universities. Some are European and others in Latin America. And this lets us see this problem in first person in our own practice. So this is where we're at. This is all work in progress. Here I can share a QR code with our most recent baby in line with making this training greener, and we're doing an online training. This is a postgraduate career, and we hope to have the accreditation pretty soon. And we want to get to a diverse topic of people, as in people probably like many of you. And to educators in the classroom who want to understand the repertoire and the scale of planning in the classroom, but also to a scale of all of the institutional strategies and how they need to think of this in an educational system or in a subnational program in line with the other two previous components. For this, we also want to have different free activities, and also as a part of our work, we can articulate this with UNESCO. We have our hearts set into the work of the VPA, and I would like to also mention the work we're doing with the regional coordination. So I'm very happy to be able to work with everyone on this, because this is another team where Adonis is also a member to mobilize the work that schools are doing for 70 years now in the PA network in our region. We also participated in another network in the OAE, and with the support of the Spanish government in the last 2-3 years, this allowed us to elaborate these studies with other colleagues from the School of Education. This allowed us to do a little, see a little scenario of the different ways in we can understand sustainable development in our region, the different ways in which we can name this, and how this polysemic, sometimes these labels that have conversations like the one that James mentioned, that we understand epistemologically where we should put in the curriculum this concern. That's a whole reason for debate, and that's briefly mapped in these documents, open source documents. Now, considering the work with communities, these are some of the little examples. We have made it a little bit harder, but for a couple of years now, we always have the challenge of sustaining resources that can be available, but hand to hand with organizations of conservation, as is the case of the whining conservation that they have their, we worked with a little coastal community in Patagonia. We are next to a network of architects and thinkers in the communities. We're trying to find different opportunities. We've done a nice work with the school so that we can add a value to the communities. This is a place and it where we want to open this for sustainable tourism, but also the growth, the populational growth, and also with our little lung that are the estuaries in Beira that are a little continuation of the Atlantic area of the Amazon that descends southwards. Another line of work that's related to the support of to communities, and it's more intergenerational. We try to be an open space for the youth organizations that come up to us and ask us for technical support. Well, I mentioned just a couple here, the Laboratory for Energy concession, who has many tools for training in Argentina and Chile. I need to also mention that with the support of the UN for Development, we also work with Eco House, another organization, in creating a network of collaborations where we put at disposition of the teachers all of the free trainings and open resources online in a very simple repository that will allow teachers to easily find the resources they might need. And at the same time, collective awareness with youth organizations that are very important, that also have influence in educational policies in our country, in our region, that are excellent teachers for us when learning how to articulate the work with others. So this is just a visual synthesis. I can share with you now this image. I'm sorry for if you know, these are my daughters, and in this image I can synthesize a little bit the way in which we understand. We would like to communicate this as a solidarity situation, intergenerational situation, something that needs clarity, that needs care and delicacy. So with this premises, I would like to share a couple of the challenges that we learned and from our researches and our work with others. We know as a part of the diagnosis that Bernardo brought that there's a lot to do when we need to strengthen the curriculums, and it's not enough to do it with the content and with descriptions and recipes and how they should be taught, but it's also important to keep on talking about the problems that we have in the curriculums in our region, and in a way sharing the rigid topics that, in a way, this is so important for other areas of formal education. And we still need to strengthen, because there are capacity gaps with every actor that's clear for this, and other actors that are very motivated, like the third sector, ONGs, organization, civil society. These usually have little incidence in the decision-making spaces, even though we invite them more and more. Sometimes this are a little bit more a decoration. So we do have a group that we have mapped for valuable policies, for programs for which we have a lot to learn horizontally and transversally in the whole region. But we have also invested in education and systematization. And this is UNESCO is a very important actor in this, and we really appreciate their efforts. So I definitely bring in, would like to share the value so that this can be an invitation, so that you could look at UNESCO as the Earth Charter as a space that tries to give this not only to give trainings so that you can come as students is not what we try to do is try to learn from everything you bring, and this is what the region needs. And since we cannot do this by ourselves, and we're also a part of this of different networks, uh, we have delineating education partnership, UniTween, and I would also like to mention the Earth Charter. So now to finish off, we understand that the development of capacities needs to affect all of this, not only the pedagogy or the specific sustainability content, but also the problem and conceptualization of the curriculum. And for those who are in the governance area, it's important to learn about the technical matters that underline all of the educational areas. This informs us of a perspective of justice, a work that can be interdisciplinary, understanding these challenges, that this is can be very complex, and for which it can be necessary to strengthen the thought, systemic capacities, and to work on multiple scales, the scale of the system, the institution, and the classrooms, understanding that these are systems that nurture each other and are interrelated from a perspective of improvement, for which it's important to have measures and to give out the diagnosis and to have ways to systematize the memories to transform not only the institutions but the cultures. So, with this comprehensive outlook, I would like to synthesize that the experience of a of the different guidelines and the partnership for green education should be like this. It should be a group of mirrors that will only make sense when we appropriate it and when we have an intention that's really transformative. And the last thing I will share is that this is not only a specific line for the Alliance of Green Education, but I would like to highlight the importance of sharing knowledge. We have a beautiful initiative that's a magazine of interdisciplinary studies on sustainable development. And this is going to allow you this is a space led and managed by young students. Some of them are going to graduate soon, but this is our first edition, and it shares a systematization of experiences with the coordinators in the Ministry of Education. So I invite you all to explore this space because it's free and it has a big effort behind it so that we can share this information. These are other publications you can explore. Here we have, I would like to close the invitation that I think that as a region we need. In this case, this is a Brazilian artist who deployed thousands of meters of fabric and invited everyone to shape this. I think that in the Alliance for Education, this gives us a lot, and this is a very generous group of. And now each one of us needs to insert our head in this and to own it so that we can accelerate the progress that is more necessary. It's now than ever. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla, for your presentation and for linking us with different spaces. And I think that this is a very interesting outlook, and it's important to look at the equivalence. You mentioned the work with the youth, that I also think it's key to include this experience with the energy and also promoting intergenerational dialogue. So Carla is going to share with you her presentation, and you're going to be able to look at the links with the materials, and you're going to learn a lot more of what they're doing. And there's a couple of questions in the chat right now for you, Carla, so we can answer them at the end. And now we can move on with the last panelist for the day. I would like to give the word to Maria Vilela. She coordinates the UNESCO for Sustainable Development and Earth Charter. She also worked with a group of experts in UNESCO, and I would like to add that she's a key actor in the update for the recommendation for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. So thank you for your support, participation, not only regionally, but individually. So thank you very much, Christian. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone from the different countries. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear Bernardo's presentation on the launch of these guidelines today. I was very surprised to hear from Adonis and how the Honduran government is working for this certificate of schools with goals in Honduras and with very specific goals for 2030. And also, it was a pleasure to hear Jason sharing his experiences in Bogotá, and Carla with the UNESCO Cátedra. For my part, I want to bring in the voice of Alicia Jiménez, who's here today and who has been leading a big part of this process, and Maria Vilches, who's also here with us from Puerto Rico, and she's also a part of this specific project. My intention today is to talk a little bit about space and with a lot of care and respect to the people who are here, who have been here for so long, and also for the interpreters. But I want to talk a little bit about the project that we did in the framework of the UNESCO Cátedra for Inclusion for Sustainable Development, this with their charter. But I'm not going to tell you everything we've been doing since 2012, but specifically, I'm going to try to explore or invite you to explore how the standards of quality are linked for green schools. So today we're going to launch the materials for in a partnership for green education and how this can be linked with one of our specific projects. That's the Earth Charter, say, and we've been working for many years now, and this was launched in 2022. Now, to give you a little bit more context, the Earth Charter was launched in 2000. There was a consultation process, and in 2003, there was a resolution by UNESCO that adopted that recognizes the Earth Charter as a key material for sustainable development, and it invited the member states to use the Earth Charter as an education instrument. This was in 2003. And in 2012, we created an UNESCO professorship in education for sustainable development with the Earth Charter, with the intention of promoting and research and training that is focused in teachers and in young people. Now, what's the difference? Since the Earth Charter is a sort of ethical compass or a ethical reference, the big approach of our work aims to drive or promote sustainability values. Now, many of the documents in UNESCO make a reference to the need to promote knowledge, skills, values, to promote planet citizenships, to promote sustainable development education or green schools. But the question is, what are these values and principles, and how can we promote them? So a big part of the work that we do is related to this. This is the approach to promote values. Now I'm going to share here a brief presentation. So when we heard at the launch of the Alliance for Green Education in 2022, This was specifically the year in which we launched the Seal for School for Earth Charter after working for over 5 years in the development for this with some pilot projects. So obviously we did follow the idea of the program of a partnership for green education, but we didn't really know the materials. We didn't really know the materials or the standard guidelines. We didn't really know because they were launched just the previous year. And obviously, these things take some time to move around or for us to get to know them. I'll try to share my screen again. Everyone can see? As I said, what I'm sharing is on the framework of our UNESCO Professorship for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter that was launched in 2012. And one of this is related to education for sustainable development. This is a project that we've been working on for some time now. And here my intention is to share not only this project, but how this links what we are launching today here. So what is this? This is a tool for schools to measure if the processes are influencing the transformation of the vision of the world of people. It has the purpose of measuring the conditions for the transformation and change and how they are incorporated in school environments. Once again, I want to emphasize that it's really related to how schools or the educational centers incorporate the values and principles of sustainability with a comprehensive institutional approach. This is a tool that's basically for learning that allows schools to reflect on their sustainable practices through the lens of the Earth Charter with this vision of how to cultivate a culture of values and ethics of care and how we can find ways to improve. So it's like a self-evaluation. The essence of the seal for school are based on the ethics of respect and care in the community of life. The main idea that we find here in the Earth Charter are related to respect and to the ideas of interdependency, ethics of care, and everything that is encompassed in this ethical compass that we use that's called Earth Charter. The seal involves two activities, two tools. The first one is a questionnaire that involves students from school that where we want to hear the voice of the students, how they perceive their educational centers, including indicators from the dimensions 1 and 2. Then there is a series of indicators that are indicators that invite us to do a self-evaluation of the educational center with 8 dimensions for the curriculum, pedagogies, physical space, etc. And these are a series of indicators. There's a committee in the school that's participative with different actors in the school that invites them to participate in this self-evaluation process by using the series of indicators that are framed here that come from the Earth Charter. Now, this school seal has 3 levels of education, as we've seen it with other organizations. It begins with the beginner level, an intermediate level and an advanced level when schools do their self-evaluation process, both for the committee and through the questionnaire with the students, so we can hear what the students are saying. Okay, so we're here because we're launching the standards for green schools for UNESCO. That was launched actually last year in English and this year in Spanish. And we're all in this process of learning what's happening. And on our part, our efforts have been to find synergies and to compare and to see what are the similarities and differences between these tools and to see how they can be used in a complementary way. So first, to highlight the dimensions here, this comprehensive encompassment that we talk about, and that in green schools, we talk about 4 dimensions. They are all comprehensive, but here we can see that in the green schools, we find the community participation, like how schools link or relate to the community, how they insert the curriculum in green schools, in the teaching and learning and infrastructure of the school, and in the school governance. So if we observe the school seal of the Earth Charter, this also encompasses the same dimensions, and it actually even goes more in detail with other dimensions, like pedagogy, events. We can observe this, that this, obviously, the standard of green schools, we also have infrastructure and operations, and we also have the standard of school, the school seal. So we did a comparison to see how we can line the indicators that you might find indicators in the framework of green schools and how they are connected to indicators we might find in the school seal Earth Charter. And here, this is just to give you a little glimpse of the area of school governance of the 26 indicators of green schools. We found that they are that 23 of them were similar. In the area of infrastructure and operations, we found 78 indicators in green schools, and out of these 78, 55 are similar to the indicators in the school seal. In the area of teaching and learning, there are 39 indicators for the standards for green schools, and out of these, 38 are similar. As for the indicators related to participation with the community, we have 43 on the one side and 40 on the other. So just to clarify, this column on the left that has 4 areas, these are the same as you can see in the column on the right area. Now, we're almost about to finish. Now, the standard of green schools has specific indicators that encompass every important aspect to make schools not only face but also help create solutions to contrast climate change. While the school sealed Earth Charter and ESG focuses on the pedagogic curriculum aspects and connects them to the other areas of the institutional comprehensive. This, as I said, this seal is a guideline for educational institutions to assess if the values and ethical principles related to sustainability presented in the Earth Charter are being put in practice and are reflected in the institutional culture. So here I would like to emphasize that this has an focus of this instrument, that's the school seal, when you hear us say, okay, we need to promote values, we need to promote an ethic of care, these are also things that we find different recommendations from different documents in UNESCO. And this is where we can find the value for which you can make use, not in a competitive way, but also complementary between these two standards. This encompasses related areas and it promotes a culture of peace and plurality and equity. Now, aspects that are not included in the school seal, but are included in the instrument for green schools: risk management, preparation of natural disasters, transportation to get to the educational center, management of electronic refugees, and a guideline to identify how to begin a process to change schools with actions that are easier and less expensive. So there are some things where we can highlight that you can find this guideline that we're now by using these two evaluation frameworks for both green schools and the school seal at charter and ESD, as school, from the perspective of the school can reinforce our commitment to sustainability. It can become agent of change and it can fight against climate change and it can put in practice a holistic education. As you know, as of you might know, for the last 15 years or 20 years, we have been trying to understand the different agendas of education in UNESCO, their different approaches, emphasis, and to find synergies and how the Earth Charter can be used as a baseline. And the school seal is a specific tool that we have generated for schools, for different schools that requested this since the year 2010. They shared the need to be self-evaluated and to have a seal that says, okay, we are a school Earth Charter. What does this mean? This means that we're a school where we work with values of the and principles of sustainability. This is an central point for our school, and we need to be recognized, to be credited, but especially we need to have a common standard among all of us. So I thank you for the opportunity, and we're going to share here on the chat more information about this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miriam, for this presentation. I think that you brought on several reflections. You mentioned how the Earth Charter is a compass and how it includes the ethics of care, and that's so important for the themes we're discussing. And this is not only for education and natural sciences or the science of climate change, but it's also related in the way in which we relate in the relationship between people and other species. So there's a big effort that the Earth Charter is doing to homologate into all of this work you've been doing for this time with the seal and green schools. So we really appreciate that we can continue with this alliance. As you realized, we are over time. The presentations have been really interesting, and some of our colleagues have been answering the questions in the Q&A box. So just to close, I would like to invite all of our panelists to answer the following question from your own experience. And this is something that I think encompasses what we've been discussing. And I think that the experience that UNESCO has can enrich the vision that our participants have so that they can go to their different places. So the question is, how have you made institutions to understand and assume an important investment to implement an interdisciplinary approach and with the view of governance? This is a question, so I invite all of you to answer these questions from your own experience. And with this, we can close. So we can follow the same order we followed. So we could begin with Bernardo. Tell us a little bit about your reflections on this question, please. Yes, it's an actor for multiple actors. It's collaborative. It does not imply only individual work of UNESCO or necessarily for in particular educational institution. It's a work we need to do collectively. And something I could exemplify is that in the last 3 years, we have tried to put in the climate agenda, particularly in the COPs, that we can talk about education. Mainly, this is oriented toward environmental topics, climate change, but not how through the adaptation and the capacities, the development capacities, we're talking about offering to the educational institutions and to involve not only the Ministry of Environment, but also the Ministry of Education, so that they can adopt mainly first political will, so that they can appropriate education and climate change, and two, through this will, they can turn every actor here to help them in the implementation. For the last 3 years, UNESCO tried to put this in the agenda. We tried to follow this effort in the next COPs too. Thank you for the participation. Thank you, Bernardo. It is interesting because what we want to do is to build political will, to build a backup that will allow us to avoid building efforts. But for example, the Paris Agreement, what we determined nationally. And so how can we get all of these to be a joint effort? That something that UNESCO has been working on. Yes, it's very important for us we always try to link, as Bernardo said, that as the Secretary of Education, we are involved in everything. But it is very important that many private companies, many institutions have an orientation of, they use their funds for activities that worry about environmental education or conservation of the resources, but they do it in a way in which, as with the other institutions and institutions of the state and private institutions, we try to get all of these activities to be oriented to educational sectors in each one of the communities. And we also planned in the Secretariat these activities so that the funds that they have can be seen in an easier way, oriented, and that can be implemented directly in the educational centers, and that they are not, so that we can also help them, that they're bringing in projects and duplicating the efforts, but that all of these are guided, oriented through us in the Secretariat of Education. This facilitates us to have the control and to place these resources in the educational areas that actually do need it, and to identify, in first instance, the institutions that have a power locally, and by doing the connections directly so that educational centers can be benefited. So this is on our side. We know that this is a big and complicated work, but the conditions every year might change, but this is something that we have we've been doing everything we've been doing in the Secretariat. Thank you very much. Yes, of course, how we can get these big projects nationally to land in the schools, the community, so that they can be discussed in the schools. This can be facilitators. So this can be your experience is very valuable. So thank you. Jason, can you tell us your experience? Yes. For us, we recognize that this process comes from a political will, as Bernardo said, and having the government plans, and this can be something for students and where we destine resources. This is big progress. The previous administration, we had an investment project that was for environmental education, and this is how we got to 100% of the educational institutions in Bogotá. Now we have an investment project, but we are in a component to get to schools from the accompaniment on prioritized learnings. This comes from a political will in which the school entities should understand that it's important to manage resources, but it is also important to have a complex view on the problem. Because of course we can have the resources, but if we have the same amount of actions and campaigns that are going to have an impact on strength, we and second, that I think is a challenge in which we need to really work a lot is the political will in institutions. One thing is what we think on the policies from the administration within the institutions, but another thing is how schools receive it. So here we have this concept that we're working on from UNESCO, that's collaborative leadership in schools. Because just as we know some educational institutions where the proposal hasn't really had an effect because there's no will from teachers, they're doing the same things they've been doing for 20, 30 years. They're not interested in renewing. These are teachers that one way or another say that they're in a comfort area, but we also find schools where there's leadership that's not only the principal or coordinators, but there's leadership with the different actors. So, for example, I would like to tell you of a situation that I experienced a couple of weeks ago in a rural school, one of the last of the schools that's further away from Bogota, where we thought it was very nice to hear that all of the teachers were working with our proposal, but also because the rector, together with the administrative equipment, were involved in the process and the curriculum planning. They motivated teachers, and it's not just the motivation that you do it because I say so, but it was a motivation on how can we debate and add to the topic. Thank you. Thank you. There's a couple of interesting things here. Transforming practices in schools, recontextualization, different negotiations of national policies in schools. This is a big topic, and many times we lose track of this. So this is something that we can take the reflection of how to involve every actor in the community. So thank you, Jason, for your participation. Carla? Thank you. I agree and share every reflection that Bernardo, Adonis, and Jameson shared. The matter of building all of the environment that includes political will. This is definitely something that we need to collaborate on. I think we need to do a contribution with different actors in a different place, but this is also a very necessary condition for our work. Having this group of political predispositions, sometimes there are micro policies, but a way to participate in this is first to inspire ourselves, and then we will have enough words to see how Maria and Luisa's work offer us ways in which we can articulate our own intentions, and they inspire us to work with other academics from UNESCO charters, and also they invite us to find the problem and guidelines that have this globalizing intentions that we understand, support 100% with all of our heart. But also, I should say, to be honest, that the academy should make a pause and think critically on what are the implications of the projects that they need to accelerate this. And for this, it's key that we should also get involved so we can work on and with schools, on and with educational systems, and we can sit down together and we can try to find in purpose how to participate in projects that will put us in this position. Every now and then, I like to sit down in a classroom with kids and young people so that I don't forget what it means to have at least one colleague that, as Jameson says, who that maybe they want to keep on doing things the same way, or to have next to me someone who wants to do things differently and they don't even know how to begin, or who wants to, knows how to, but doesn't have the support of their directors. So I think that 360 view, not every social actors who intervene in this problem can do it. Maybe it's a luxury that I have and it's something that I keep on choosing. But as long as we can do this, the key is to keep on working with others and with sensitivity to learn that it's important to work with those who think differently, not only against those who think differently. So yeah, that's what I think. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carla. This is very interesting. And also the social responsibility of the academy, the control of evidence that will allow us to make better decisions, allow us to base the policies in evidence. And many times this prioritizes this work that they belong the things that are challenges of whole humanity. So there's also an interesting invitation to work with those who think different than us, but also to build the interest for the common challenge that we have with education that we have. Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you. It's great to hear what everyone's saying. Now, to answer your question, how can we make educational centers to work on a multidimensional approach? This is related to changing our mental models, changing the way in which we look at things, and even the purpose of education and how education works right now. I think that we all need to put this hat on. That's a constant, because this things are changing a lot, but mainly promoting this awareness and contributing to improving our society. But what's most natural, it doesn't really talk about climate change or green school sustainability. What's most natural is to integrate these topics if in a fragmented way, to create a separate course, like an event, a session. That's good, but in general, this effort is limited to education on sustainability, on climate change, that gives us knowledge, but not necessarily transforms the person. But I think that what's ideal is to integrate these topics in the curriculum, in the culture of the institution, not only to limitate this in a specific class, but also to incorporate this in the culture of the institution and in all the areas of learning. And I would like to end by saying that the main challenge is to think of the purpose of education. And when we talk about the big challenges, climate change, pollution. When we work with a COP, the topic of education in general, it's on the margin. This is also related to a limited vision of looking at the big purpose of education. And this is something to promote the 2030 agenda. And for this, we need to have a focus that could let us see and finance nationally, locally, to do this, because as we saw here, Bernardo, at first, most of the students don't know what to do. The reality is that most of the students who are here, the teachers who are here know, but they don't know how to do this in their areas. So here we have a very nice challenge that can be approached with clarity. Thank you. Yeah, this is a comprehensive look. I think this is key because we tend to think on how we can make this in the curriculums. And this needs to be a look further on, but this is related to schools, curriculums, communities, the different actors that involve the transformation of the education. Now, to close off, because I think that we really exceeded the time, I would love to stay here talking with everyone. These were very interesting presentations. Now, I would like to finish up with what you said at the end. Certain holistic approaches, as they said, bringing in this look of different levels that Carla said, key participation, as Jameson said, the role of the Secretariat of Education, and our role as facilitators, the involvement of different levels, and actors in the society, as Adonis said and Bernardo said, and this role of integrating education and following negotiation processes and other agendas related to climate change, so that they can facilitate this toward the world we want. So having said this, I would like to thank everyone. We've been here for over 2 hours, so I really appreciate your patience and interest in this conversation with everyone. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.